Hello everyone and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for our Dreamtsoft Service Management presentation on configuration and customization of the platform. My name is John Manseri and I'm going to be your host today. All of us at Dreamtsoft appreciate you taking the time to visit with us today. We're going to strive to make this session informative and fun. Let me mention a few points to get started. The audio lines are going to be muted, so please submit your questions via the Zoom Q&A window. We'll try to answer your questions as we go along. There will also be Q&A at the end of the hour. This presentation is being recorded, and a link will be sent to everyone, as well as posted on our YouTube channel. In addition, part one of this series, which was last month on the ITSM and MSP platforms, is posted on YouTube now if you wish to review that at some point. To continue, I'm pleased to mention that we have a few special guests with us today, some names you might be familiar with. Bo Ruggieri and Jared Bennett, our founders, are with us today, as well as Donovan Stone, one of our senior application architects. Jared and Donovan will be running the demonstration today, primarily Donovan. I'm sure that some of these names will be familiar to you as these folks are industry veterans. A little bit about us. Back in 2014, Bo and Jared established Dreamtsoft with the goal of creating a new platform to drive service management, free from the prior assumptions of how this type of software should work. And what they had in mind were a few things: to provide a simple and elegant platform for people to develop on and use that platform to build an application suite, to use this opportunity to correct certain architectural things that could have been done better with prior platforms, and to combine increased value and functionality and simplified licensing. And how we got to this point is pretty interesting. Looking back, we can see the beginnings and the evolution of the IT support tools. You've seen the HDI days and the help desk going quite a ways back. Then we had the dawn of ITIL best practices and the service desk concept. And then, of course, the rise of managed service providers, which has been pretty dramatic. And now the move to the cloud, SaaS, those types of models, and artificial intelligence. And now the next generation is here, and Dreamtsoft is proud to be part of that new generation. Today we'll focus on the many ways that you can configure the system to meet your requirements and preferences, and you'll see the power and flexibility that is built in and how you can create custom workflows. At last count, we had 100 people signed up, and a quick glance at my screen says we're well over 30 right now attending. Okay, so I want to thank you again for the great turnout. Now, it doesn't matter if you're an MSP person, enterprise, education, government, whatever it is, we're all in the service business, we're all service providers. If there's one point on this slide I really want to emphasize is that we all have a common goal, and that's to provide the infrastructure and systems that kind of push our businesses ahead, whatever it may be. We've designed Dreamtsoft to give you the things you need to do that. And as an example, we perfected our multi-tenant capabilities, configuration flexibility, and workflow abilities to help you do just that. There's some functional differences to each of these areas, meaning MSP, enterprise ITSM, and so forth. We've designed Dreamtsoft to accommodate those, and there's kind of overlap in some of the platform areas and some of the application spots. But as you can see, we've tried to put together a complete suite to give you folks what you need. There are core functions shared, and a few that are particular to a specific purpose. But the bottom line is all of these things can be customized and digital workflows created to meet your goals. So now that I'm done with the introductions, I'm going to turn it over to Donovan Stone and also Jared, who's assisting, and let these guys do the technical part of this. Please put your questions in the Q&A window. We will stop every once in a while to get those answered. If there's something we can't answer at the moment, we will go ahead and put that at the end of the presentation or get you an answer via email, whatever it may take. So Donovan, I've transferred control to you. If you will take over, please, I'd appreciate it.
Perfect. Is my screen showing up, and can you hear me?
Yes, sir, both ways, screen and hearing.
Perfect. All right, so I'm going to start off with a few slides just kind of on the evolution of ITSM and as well as ITSM tools, and also why configuration is going to be so important with not only your process design, but also with the tool that supports that process. So just a little analogy here. If you look at where ITSM is going, obviously there's a big push towards lean thinking. The idea is based on lean manufacturing. So lean manufacturing kind of really got its start back with the Ford assembly line, right? Building out a Model T was so innovative because of the way that Ford had built that out, and every station had its purpose, and he could churn, an umpteenth amount of these Model Ts out. So it was a game changer when you were producing something that you kind of knew the end result. It was great for making Model Ts, but one thing it wasn't great for is variation. Back when the Model T was being created, there was basically one car. It was the Model T. There were a few other ones, but that's what Ford was producing. As time evolved, after World War II, and the variety of cars came out, there needed to be a system that was built that allowed for more variation, but also eliminated the waste, which is really kind of the main principle in that lean production. So Toyota Production Systems came through after World War II and built on Ford's ideas. And some of the big components there was it allowed for that variation through identifying workflow, the configuration, and being able to quickly change tools, being able to communicate and collaborate between different process teams. That's where the Kanban board was originated from, actually putting a piece of paper up on a wall or on a chart so that people could see what parts to order. So the idea is that was the evolution, right? It's becoming more mainstream to see that flexibility is key, and you can't just build a rigid system out there because things change on a dime. And we're seeing the exact same thing in the ITSM and service management world. ITIL version 3 was phenomenal. When it came out, it really gave you the idea that you can take a service and run it through this process while it's focused on service strategy, and also have that continual improvement wrapped around it. So what it's going through, your strategy, and the process it's going to go through. But it was a very linear process. It was fairly siloed. It did take in the 4 Ps. However, it was basically focused almost exclusively on IT. ITIL 4 has taken more of the lean approach, where it's taken the process out of it, and it's taken something like incident management, which once was a process, and changed it into a practice. So you're using it more like ingredients in a recipe, where you can use it 1, 2, 3 times. It can dance back and forth, as you see in this red value stream line, that it's going multiple places in those different practices. And taking more of a holistic view of IT, right? It's involving the partners, it's involving other parts of the business, it's involving the customers at the end, and it really is designed to be customizable and flexible. And that's where really Dreamtsoft is built to shine. You want that type of flexibility. You want to be like this guy here, where you're not in a rigid, strict process, because not only is that the solution provider that's dictating what the process is, but you're going to have to go through and map out your value streams. If you listen to the core components of ITIL 4, one of them is start where you are. And every single organization is at a different starting point. So you can't build a system that is inflexible, because every single organization is going to have a different starting point. You need to be able to automate where you can. You need to be able to integrate with other systems. That's going to reduce that amount of waste, that amount of time that something is in a holding pattern. And then, of course, the whole purpose of this is to be able to continuously improve. And then when you find areas to continuously improve, you're going to need to adjust that process. And if that system is rigid and unable to adjust, and you're unable to get the value that you need out of the system after you've mapped out your value stream, you're going to have to look for another system, or you're going to have to basically continue to have that waste in certain areas, because the process itself is held up by technology, and it's not as efficient as it should be. So I hit on those 3 slides just to kind of set the tone for what we'll show you today. The idea here is, how can you configure the Dreamtsoft platform? In our previous webinar, we showcased what we'll call the out-of-the-box solution that we expect you to configure. This will go through the different areas of the platform, how to configure it. Things like life cycles, dynamic approvals. We also have something called schema tags, which is basically like a dynamic data model. And the use case that we'll use for this is to basically build out a human resources app, right? Human resources may have, the organization may have seen the success that the IT department was having with the service management application and said, we want that. We want a portal. We want a list of tasks. We want to be able to create our own process. We want to map our value stream in HR and identify where we can reduce waste. So that's what we're going to walk you through. And as we go through, it will show you all the different components and areas that you can configure, not only in the HR app, but also in the out-of-the-box service management app that we provide, or any other applications that you may build. So I'm going to pause here for a second. We do have, as John mentioned, Jared and Bo on the question and answer form. So if you do have any questions as we go through, we will try and answer those as fast as we can. We'll also take a few as we go through the process and try to answer those live. So as you can see, the last webinar we had was around the service management application. You know, the left-hand nav, this is our service desk homepage. I'm actually in the space that exists where we built out for that webinar. I have created another space to just kind of show you, to start at the end, what our goal is here. So I jumped into a configuration space, and one thing I do want to point out is, for those that didn't see the previous webinar, not only does our space capability allow you to manage multiple customers, but it allows you to have as many dev or sandbox environments as you want. So this
Hey,
gives
Donovan,
you that, yeah.
Forgive the interruption. We're looking at a Padres screen at the moment.
A Padres screen?
Yes.
I'm glad you stopped me there.
No, it was of use. It just wasn't about spaces and tenants.
I'm trying to share Google Chrome, but thank you for that. Let me stop that here. Oh, I see what happened there. How does that look?
Better. Thank you.
And it's significantly less embarrassing. Thank you for that. Okay, regroup. So the idea here was, we started off with a, you know, our webinar space, and I'm going to jump back into that. And this was where our out-of-the-box service management application was. Right, this is where we showed on our last webinar. But as I was stating before, we have the tenancy model where not only can you manage multiple customers and give them their own unique environment, their own data, their own process, but this also provides you that capability to have essentially unlimited dev environments, so that the DevOps type system where you don't have to talk to operations in order to get a development environment and start building either configurations or new applications. So from here, you have that you know, HR application that we've already built out. But just to show you, you know, this lives alongside our service management application. I can go in here and have a home page. I can look at my HR work. I have a left-hand navigation menu. We're going to go through, like I said, workflow triggers. We're going to go through some of that dynamic data contact. But really, the end result is going to be a pretty simple HR application, but with some pretty complex elements through there. So I'm going to jump back into our webinar space and really just kind of walk through this entire process. So HR asks for the same functionality as service management. Of course, they would go through a requirements gathering process, but you could also do some dynamic prototyping for them and say, you know what, let's show you what you can have, instead of having to sit through months and months of identifying the requirements. And then we can work with that agile approach, iterate through it, and define exactly what you need and see what works. So from here, from my space tree, I'm going to create a new space, call it HR Dev. And I have that ability to already have a creation definition. So this allows you to package, pre-package what that space may already contain, so you don't have to go through and install multiple applications on there. If you already know, I want it to live alongside service management and utilize some of that service management functionality, I already have a definition of that service management defined in my parent space. So I hit OK. In a matter of seconds, I now have that sandbox environment in my Dreamtsoft instance, and you can see it here, HR Def. I can switch into it. As I do, you'll see that I already have service management installed. So I don't have to worry about, like I said, installing any of that functionality if I'm going to live alongside or live on top of that service management application. Some of this is going to be repetitive from building a custom app if you've seen any of those videos, but I'm going to build a brand new bundle here and just call it HR Work. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to call it HR. And what that will do is basically create a container now that once I start working, all of my configurations will live in this HR Work bundle, this HR container. And when we get into the Git integration, you'll see how valuable that is when we start pushing and pulling. So jumping into this HR Work, I don't have anything built, so I'm just going to quickly build a table just so we've got something to work with. I'm going to navigate to our bucket menu. So there is a reason we call this buckets, is because a table is a bucket, but a bucket's not always table. But we will call this HR Work because that's, well, spell that right. And finally, for the name, if you do spell it correctly on the first try, it actually speeds up because it auto-populates that. Now I could make this a table. Tables start from scratch, or I'm going to make it a classification, and that basically is an extension from another table. And we've built a lot of process around work. Work is kind of a foundational table that we have where you can do things like assignment rules and SLAs against work and have a consolidated work queue. So the idea is for reporting purposes and to build on top of what we already have in the system, I'm going to make this a parent of work. As I save that, you'll see down below all of the fields that I have inherited. So all of the standard work fields like assignment group, number, requested by, those are all going to be available to me. So now I have my custom app, I've got my table structure, and what I need to do now is kind of go through and build out my value stream or build out my life cycle. While I'm doing that, Jared's actually going to go in the background and build out some of the, I don't want to call it mundane stuff, but some of the other things like the navigators and the home page that you can see on some of our other videos. And we'll tie all of that into our Git repository so that way you can see how we can push and pull and use those kind of co-development process. Jared, did you have something to say?
Can you go ahead and publish the bundle?
Absolutely. So part of that process of co-development or developing in general is the capability of going through and pushing this to a Git repository. So we wanted to be able to use the tools that are out there that are, the best tools, and Git is one of those. So, but being able to get that functionality and utilize that allows us to gain those features, whether it's conflict detection, branching, releases, all of that is built right into Git. So I have a Bitbucket repository up in the cloud, and I'm going to push that up there or publish that into the repo if I type my password incorrectly. See if I get that on the first try. Perfect. This is now linked, as you can see, to this Git repository. So as I go through and make local changes and we build this out, I will see all those local changes there. And as Jared makes changes in the background, I'll be able to see what remote changes he has and if I want to consume them. So as we go through, we'll touch on that and be able to show that real time as those changes were made. So I have my HR app. I'm going to go through now. I've built out my table. What I want to do is build out the actual life cycle. So going to my navigation menu, we have 3 different types of life cycles, but the main one we're going to build out right now is just kind of the flow. So HR Work automatically inherited a life cycle field from that work table. So that's why it's appearing here as a bucket that I'm able to create a life cycle for. So I'm just going to throw in a few lifecycle states. Pending approval, I'll make this an approval stage. And when we get to the approval configuration, I'll show you how to configure that. we'll just call this work in progress. Make it a normal state. Completed, and maybe canceled. All right, so my pending approval state, I will say, I'm going to save that. And then as I go through, I can set these pending approval values. So where do I want to transfer to? If I'm successful, well, I'll just go to work in progress. If I fail, I'll just send it down to canceled, and I'll make sure I add an E to my complete. I'm also able to pick the transitions here. So if I go to work in progress, maybe I can go to complete, and maybe I can go to canceled, you know, if it's something that midway through I want to cancel. This allows you to limit that value stream or that life cycle and determine where you can hop to and where you can't. So I'm going to save that. And now, very simple, you know, I've got something that's pending approval. I know when someone's going to work on it. And then I also know if it's complete or if it's canceled. Now, I did put an approval in here, which I have an approval type, but I need to define that approval. So I'm going to head back to my navigation or my config navigation and go down to my approval lifecycle and create a new approval configuration. So we'll call this HR work approval. We'll keep it as simple. We'll make it on that HR work table that we just created. I can put a condition in there, but I'll just leave this blank. And now the approvers are really key here. Who are my approvers? Well, maybe it is the not the requested by. Click too early on that. The requested by manager, right? This is kind of the standard default way of creating an approver. I'm just going to basically look at the reference field on the requested by and have them be their manager. So that's perfect. I'll save that. But Dreamtsoft has the capability to go beyond just your standard reference field. We have this notion called relationships, which is essentially one giant table in the system that you can relate one record to another. So you see this in incident management, you see this in change management, you see it basically everywhere in our platform. So what I can do is create a brand new relationship definition here, and I'm going to head over there, still in my HR bundle, and we'll say the person record on one side and then the department person or the department on the other side. Just grab a default approver type in there, which is something we have out of the box, and we'll just say a default for HR work. Now, once I create that relationship, I can head back to my approval configuration and I can see, you know, I had my requested by manager, and you can see that with this little link that is a branch or a related field. But if I have a department on my requested by, now as I expand that, I have a default approver. So now I can go out and say, this is the department's default approver, and instead of having an individual manager for every single person, I can just say, oh, that person is in a department, and this is the default approver for that department. So I'll get rid of this requested by manager. I've created a relationship, and now I've set that to an approval. So like I said, you see approvers you see relationships everywhere in the platform. And I'll jump back into my webinar space just to show you some of that. So if I head over to incident management and I look at an example incident, and this is from the previous webinar, this widget down below is our pre-built relationships we have for the incident record. So you can see we have knowledge management where you can go out and actually search the knowledge base. And these are portal workflows that you're able to create, or excuse me, relationship workflows that you're able to create based on adding that relationship. You can actually say, before you build this relationship, what do you want me to do, and have workflow in there. Same thing down below, we have people. So when I utilize the @mention in the system, oops, and I @ someone in the system, we already have pre-built workflow that is going to add those relationships in there and say, hey, Aaron is now assisting on this record. So relationships are going above and beyond just your standard reference record in there, and we're able to use them in many, many places, incident, in change, and as well as any custom apps like we're building here for HR. So I'm going to jump back into my HR dev space and discuss a little bit of the Git integration that we have. So it looks like Jared has, if I jump back into HR and I jump into my information for this bundle, I can look at any remote changes that may be living out there. And I can see I have an update, it's authored by Jared, and it's the navigation and number. That's the message he put. I also have made changes myself by adding the approval configuration and the approval flow. So first thing I want to do is I'm going to push this, but because there are outstanding changes, it's going to ask me, wait a second, before you push this, do you want to pull? Because you want to have the latest and greatest to make sure that, hey, something you built didn't conflict with that. So I'm going to pull that down automatically. And then I'm going to, as soon as I do that, it's going to push that up in the world. So now I don't have any local changes because I know I'm up to date, and I don't have any remote changes because all of those changes that Jared had already made, I've already consumed, I've pulled down, and then I've pushed back up into our Bitbucket repository. Now I'm using Bitbucket because it's free, but you can use a local Git repository, you can use GitHub, GitLab, basically just any URL with the right credentials, and you can push and pull to that. But now you can see that Jared has wonderfully put in some navigation for us. I can go to a list of all HR work. I can see work that's assigned to me, and he's also given us this navigation on the left-hand side. If I want to build a home page, I can do that myself. But we're going to focus more right now on some of the workflow and process. So my HR world lives, and I have my HR tasks that I'm able to go in. And if I need to create a new one, I can put a title in. This is a very basic form, but I might have a requirement.
Pull one more time, Donovan.
Sure. Oh, pull one more time.
Hang on just a second. I'm gonna push. You're running just a little bit ahead of me. I'm gonna push these latest ones. Pull in about 30 seconds.
You know what? I'm going to pause here because we did get a question, and I'm going to see what this question is. Can I script my approval logic based on conditions and derive the approver or multiple approvers? So you do have the ability to script a more advanced approval workflow, and I'm going to jump back into the webinar space to show you that. So if I jump into, let's go, I think our normal change RFC. So this is our normal change RFC, and you can see we use the same workflow editor here where you're able to not only define the approvers, but if you needed to, you can start to get more advanced with this. Now, this is a multi-level approver where you're going to vitums, and then you're doing an if condition and going to subject matter experts and financial. And this gives you more flexibility than just going out and building in the relationships. So we have advanced and we have the simple kind. Now, let's see here. Is there an ability to create automated tests to do test first development? So that one, with the Git integration, there are some of that functionality that you can do through GitLab where it'll do the kind of CI/CD functionality. And I don't know, Bo or Jared, do you know, I know we had some automated tests that were built into the system. We were using an external tool. I don't know if you guys could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, we do. With a lot of our local bundles, our local bundles like our service management, we do have end-to-end tests. So we do just use kind of the test cafe and the node package where we package it in the bundle, and we're able to basically run that through like a CI/CD type of notion of when you push something to that repo, we'll kick that off and run those tests. So you could do that yourself, where if you were building a bundle, you had those tests in there and have a hook in any commits to that repo to run through and run those things. You could do it most likely through like if you had a test space. We actually have a customer that set up a kind of a REST API to just spin up a new space and pull that down and then run those end-to-end tests against it. Since the spaces are pretty lightweight and they're easy to spin up and delete.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, I'm going to jump back into our HR dev space, our development space, and I'm going to go into my bundle here, and I'm going to pull, as Jared requested, because I think he's made a few more changes. So I'll be able to go down to my remote changes here, see what Jared did. Forms and lists and a home page, awesome. So head up to the upper right, and I'll commit, or I will pull those down. Now, as an app builder, you can see that there's also the notion of releasing next version and bundle. So this is just kind of co-creating and development, pushing to a master branch, but you're able to go through and push to feature branches if necessary, and then also do full releases where if you're not on a development space, like if a customer's not on a development space, they would actually only be able to consume the next release. They wouldn't see all these changes that may be happening while you're developing. And of course, you can control when that gets released. So head back to my HR bundle. I've now got a home page. I've got forms and lists. Wonderful. So I can go through and I can create some sort of HR work and just throw some people in there. And I don't have any people in this space. And then that will, of course, show up in our new form look and feel. But what if HR needs to be able to integrate with an external system? Right, and that's going to be huge when you're talking about ITIL and you're saying, people, or I guess the 4 Ps are old, but you definitely need to take that holistic view, and you need to work with external vendors when you map out your value stream. So you want to integrate and be able to get that data back and forth. So for instance, on this HR work record we're looking at, what if I wanted to put a button on there that would go out and maybe pull in some either vendor information or maybe the latest HR regulations? And in order to do that, I can head over to my bucket management and create something called an action. So an action is a variety of things. We have a browser action, which is more of like your buttons, but we also have triggers, which are going to be more like data changes on the back end. So as data changes, it'll automate that and it can run that in the background. Browser actions are more client-based, or actually they are client-based, so you'll get those in the browser, whereas trigger are server. So as that data changes on the database, it'll be initiated. So I'm going to create a browser action. And, of course, external systems may exist where you're pulling in HR information, but this HR person is a huge cat fanatic, and they want to pull in a fact about cats. So luckily, there is an open API called Cat Facts out there that allows you to hit it unauthenticated and pull in some sort of cat fact. So I'm going to head down to my HR work. I'm going to call this thing cat fact. I'm going to put the same thing on the label. I'm going to add an icon to it. We have a whole myriad of different icons, and one of them includes a cat. So throw that little cat in there. We'll make it a primary button. I could also make it a secondary, which of course kind of hides it behind the ellipses. This is going to live on the details component, which is basically the form. If I wanted this to be on a list component where I could check multiple boxes and then create that button, I could do the same thing on a list component, and this could run on multiple records. So I'm going to save this. This is basically the foundation of that button. And now I'm going to go through and build out the workflow. So first thing I'll do is just do a simple confirmation. When someone clicks this, just say, would you like to get a cat fact? Yes or no, and it's going to go, and we'll just say the default button's okay. Excellent. I'm going to say, yes, I want to get a cat fact. So the next step I'll do is I'm going to do a little bit of a run script, which is going to do a REST post integration out to that API. So first thing I'll do, and I've got this script just kind of hanging out here. And I'm going to paste that in. So this is using our HTTP scriptable, where you can do, actually it's doing a get instead of a post. But what I'm doing is basically calling the scriptable, doing a get, getting the user object back, and I'm going to set that response to something we call an output variable. So you can see this upper right tab here. This is where I can create an output variable, and this allows it to be portable and be able to use throughout the rest of the workflow. So we'll just quickly call it cat, or sorry, we'll call it fact. We'll save that. And the way that you call that is action.output and then the name of the variable. So I already knew it was going to be called fact, and I'm going to pull that in from and set that to the response I get back from that REST post. Down below here, we have a table called speaks, and that's basically like the comments section on any record. So anytime you type in something on that HR work, you're basically going through and typing in a speaks. So I'm going to go through and put that on HR work. I'm going to take the record ID so it's associated with the right record. But one thing I need to do is pull in that script from the output variable. So actually, I'm going to cut this out. Excuse me. Try that again. And I'm going to drop this into a separate run script just to show you how we use these variables. So now I'm going to, we'll call this one update the record. I could have kept it in the same one, but I need to use that fact variable in my script. Now I've commented this out because every time you create a new variable, you need to be able to grab the latest version of it. So I'm going to go over here to my variable selector, say, okay, I want to use this cat fact, and now I have the ability to reference that for any kind of script usage. So I'm going to upgrade that or update that record. I go to my outputs, drop that in here, and I'm going to uncomment that. So now what we've done is we've done a confirmation. We're running the script to do the get. We're getting the cat fact from an external source. We're now also going to update that record itself. And I could do another confirmation, or I could, something maybe like a refresh. So we'll just refresh the pane. So that way, if there was any updates and we want to see that, that will happen. So I hit OK or save. And now I will have a button on my HR work. And if everything works correctly, here's my cat. Cross your fingers. Would you like to get a cat fact? Hit OK. And here we go. Cats, especially older cats, do get cancer. Oh, it's not the happiest cat fact, but it can be treated successfully. Whew. Really turned around on that one. So, that obviously is a little bit silly. You might not be pulling in cat facts, but you might be pulling in, like I said, HR regulations, or maybe there's payroll information from something like Workday or some external system that you need to pull in and say, I need a point in time integration here so I can see exactly what they were. And that's basically how you do it. We do go beyond just a simple REST API. So, obviously that didn't have any authentication, but if I jump back into my webinar space and I look at the OAuth configurations, this is a example of how we can integrate with QuickBooks, and this is using OAuth authorization. So you don't have to do that dance back and forth where you're going back and getting the authorization and then getting the token and then doing the refresh token. We can do all that for you if you just plug in your client ID and you plug in your URLs, and then once you have this authorization built out, you can then use that in your workflow and say, hey, I'm just going to call this authorization. And if that token's relevant, then you can use it. If it needs to refresh, then it will automatically go through and do a refresh. So we have these built out for QuickBooks and the Graph API for Microsoft, et cetera. But really what it comes down to is just kind of plugging in those, and then you can drop them directly into your script. So, and then of course, if you do have something where you're just doing basic authentication, you can also add that into your header, which it wasn't required for me to do that in my workflow, but it's very straightforward, just adding it as a line with your username and password. And then one final thing, we also have an encrypted credentials table. So you don't want to have to hard code username and passwords into your workflow, but you can call out either from a user profile or on that table that's related to that user profile and pull in individual credentials if necessary. So when interacting with APIs, you can get the user's information correctly. All right. jump up into the Q&A. It doesn't look like we have a whole lot of questions in there. So the next thing we'll talk about here is, we'll continue on the integration theme. And one of the main troubles that I've seen in integrations, and I actually worked for an integration company, is having to be able to manipulate those integration IDs and data that the other system needs, right? Sometimes you need 1 or 2 or 3 fields. Sometimes you need, several different types of fields because you need the last time it was updated, or the URL, or, just the correlation ID. So a lot of times you will just add fields to your table and then say, this is my Slack ID, this is my Workday ID, and then you end up with this huge table. Well, we have a way to make that very modular. And it's what I like to call, a dynamic data model, dynamic data as a service. But what we call the actual functionality of it is something called schema tags. So if I had my bucket management, I can create a series of fields that can be injected into a record as part of a process, either by someone clicking on that and toggling it, or by as it goes through a workflow and it actually becomes tagged by that, and then as it is tagged, it inherits that schema. So you can see we have integrations here, and we have tons of different schemas. So for instance, there's a monitoring system called N-Central, and when we integrate with our CMDB, we can integrate with N-Central and be able to pull in those fields. And as I look at this N-Central integration, you can say, this is the device ID, this is last loaded, and this is URL. So when you turn on the N-Central essentially integration, you have these fields anytime you integrate with an N-Central device. You didn't have to build them on the table ahead of time, but I can manage this. If for some reason N-Central comes back and says, hey, now we have another field that is required, all I need to do is come in here and add it to this schema tag, and I don't have to go touch my table on my CMDB, because this lives kind of in isolation, and I can pick and choose when I want this to live on my record. So if I wanted to do another integration, and let's say integrate with a collaboration tool like Slack, I may want to have a Slack ID or a Slack webhook. So what I'll do is I'll create a new schema tag. We'll just call it Slack. I'm going to put this on the person table, right? So basically anybody who I dictate has a Slack integration, I can go to that person and then toggle that. Now this can be applied optionally, as a trait, and a trait is more of like a first class type of schema where you want it to be front and center on the user record or whatever record you're having. So I'm going to say this is going to be on as a trait, and I'm just going to drag this over, call this Slack, and make it a string. Now that is actually going to have a real basic integration, because it's not asking for any authentication. And what's interesting in Slack is you can create a kind of inbound webhook that allows you not to authenticate, and you can actually post to a Slack channel. And that's what we're going to do for a real simple example. So I've created a schema tag that is on the person record. So if I head over to my people, and there's Donovan, or we'll grab Jared today. And now I can see, I've got some information up here like user. It looks like Jared is a user, and this is the toggle to be able to tag that. And now I want to make Jared Slack enabled. So I can toggle that, see my Slack field. I'm going to grab this pre-generated webhook that I got from my Slack configuration, and this is for Jared. And I'm going to save that. And now I have Jared set up and ready to be able to post to Slack, right? I simply created that schema tag. I added a slot. I toggled Jared as ready to be able to consume that, and then I added this webhook. So the foundation's there, but now what I want to do is be able to create a trigger that says anytime Jared is mentioned on a record, that's going to go to his Slack, and he's going to be able to get that in his Slack collaboration tool, right? So in our system, if I was in my ITSM system and I was mentioned on a record, we have this notification badge in the bottom left-hand corner. That will let me know anytime I get a notification internal. But I do have to have this open, or I have to log back in, and I want to have my Slack be able to notify me because I'm on that all the time on my phone, etc. So what I can do is go back into my HR app to ensure that this goes in. I'm going to build an action. And instead of building a browser action, I want to create a trigger that says anytime that I get an internal Dreamtsoft push notification, I also want to get a Slack notification. So I'll call this push to Slack. We'll have it happen before the record's inserted. The bucket will be, we have a bucket called push notifications, which is that exact, that bell in the bottom left-hand corner that I showed. Anytime it's inserted, I could put a condition in here. We'll just keep it without a condition for now. And I'm going to add a run script, and I'll just paste this script I have in here. Now, this is a little bit bigger of a script compared to the cat fact, and I can kind of just talk through the phases of it. But what we do is we've got two functions in here. So one thing I did not call out at the beginning is this is all JavaScript, right? So if you know JavaScript or know some basic object-oriented programming, this should be very, very quick and easy to pick up. Of course, there is some Dreamtsoft uniqueness to it, like our fRecord API that allows you to update records without having to talk to the SQL backend, or actually we use Postgres. But you can see here that this is just basic two JavaScript functions. One of them where we're building the URL or the link from the data on the record, and the second one where we're actually sending the message to the user. And this is where we're doing the HTTP scriptable, and we're doing a post. So we do have logging in here. So if if you need to debug, et cetera, we can log out to that console log. But what it's doing is it's basically looking for that field that I just created called Slack, based on that schema tag that I added, and it's going to go through and post to that URL that webhook that I put in there. So I hit OK, I connect the dots, I save, and now if I head back over to my HR work, and maybe we'll just look at that. Here's one that's work in progress. Looks like Jared's been doing some work on here, included with the cat fact, but I'm going to bring Jared Bennett in on this. It's my local Jared Bennett, and say, can you help? And as I hit, can you help? I'm going to go over to this other tab I have up here, and you can see, hey, can you please help with this HR request? Jared's Slack gets that. It just happened at 11:48. I can click on that. That URL that I built out will take me directly to there. And now Jared has information, and he can be able to go in and work on that. So, collaboration is key. There's tons of different systems out there. The big ones we hear about are, Microsoft Teams and Slack. I know Discord's getting a lot of traction as well, even though it was originally a gaming system. But we have the API capability, we have the authentication, the OAuth configuration capability, and then it just goes into where do you want to build that in your workflow? Is it part of your lifecycle? Is it a button you push? As you go through and map out your value streams and identify those, that's when you can figure out, that's where you figure out where the outside vendor system or even internal vendor system comes in. So that was a trigger. So we've touched on browser components. We've touched on triggers. Another important one that a lot of people ask us about is the notification actions, right? So how do I build out custom notifications? Well, if I head back to my gears here and I go to my bucket management and go to actions, this is my list of all actions, and like I said, you can see the triggers we have out of the box, the browser actions we have out of the box, and we also have notification actions. So I can click this little magnifying glass, which will filter down, show me my notification actions. And you can use these as a starting point. So for instance, if I want an updated notification action, anytime someone goes through and updates that HR work, I'm just gonna steal the incident updated end user notification action. So I'll just click on that. And this is in my service management bundle. A little bit of a kind of a cheat, but to ensure that I get this creation or this configuration change into my HR bundle, so it doesn't live in my ITSM bundle or my service management bundle, I'm just going to go up into the URL and I'm just going to manually type in dev.hr. right? And that's going to bring up the same record, but now it's in the context of my HR bundle. So if I make those changes, I can make sure that they get pushed up into Git. Now, I could move them around later if I forget, but this is kind of the easiest way to get out in front of that and ensure that it does belong to that HR bundle. So, I'll go in here and change something and call it HR work updated. I'm going to change it on the HR work bundle. This is just on update. I could keep this incident updated template, or if I wanted to, I could go create another one. But generally, this is going to be good. This is the incident updated template. It would probably be the best idea to copy this as well and change this to HR work has been updated. This gives you the full HTML of that. You could make it very simple without any styling, but we have some baseline functionality that allows you to put logos and color schemes directly into these email templates. So it's sometimes better to use our out-of-the-box templates. It's a baseline. And then just kind of add your own flavor to that, like this text here that I would change to HR work. But I'm not going to change that now. I could copy that. But this would be a custom notification using that template. And then I can decide who is going to receive this. Well, it could be the requested by, maybe anybody assisting or watching. And then, of course, I could use that relationship that I had before and go back to that department and say, well, what about that default approver? Maybe any HR request needs to also go to that default approver. And you can see, instead of just using the reference icon here with this little branch, I've got this little relationship icon that is going to use that relationship I built earlier in the webinar. So now they're added to that. So all 4 of these people can be updated. I may want to get rid of the assisted and watching, and now it's just going to go to the requested by and the approver. Save that. And looks like it went back to my old one. I'll have to double check if that's stuck, but I think I didn't hit the copy button. But once you do that, then you'll have a custom notification for you, a notification action, and we'll see if that did stick in there, and it did not, but that would be listed here as a custom notification action. I won't go back through that again. I just forgot to hit copy and then save it at first. But when you do copy that record, save it, and then you can go through and make those changes. So we have our foundation. We have our tape. Sorry, was there a question?
There is one question in the window, Donovan.
Yep. Oh, gotcha.
Can you read it?
Questions around credentials. Since
Yes.
credentials means it would be easy to build generic workflow, which could populate with the current user access and data. Which tests receive data through an API, current user credential. Like a huge cased workflow. So yes, so basically you could build out a generic workflow, and one of those stages or one of those boxes could say, whoever the user is, reach out to that user record, find their encrypted credential, and use that credential for the post. So that way you're using the user that is listed either on that record or the authenticated user, depending on what your workflow is. If this is something where the user who's authenticated has typed in their credentials in a relationship table or a credential table, then you could build the workflow generic enough that it's going to use those credentials, but then anybody who's got credentials in the system would be able to integrate. And if you don't have credentials, you could have a pop-up that says, you don't have credentials to integrate with this system, please talk to your admin or enter credentials here. So yes, and that credentials table is encrypted, so you don't have to worry about someone going in there and being able to look at a list of credentials if they have access to that table. Okay, so a few minutes left. I want to wrap up. So we have our foundational table. As an HR person, I'm able to go in, and Jared has added some charts here, and I've got some gauges up top, so I can sit in my HR portal and I can now start to work. I've created a button that integrates with an external system by going out and pulling in a wonderful cat fact that then also populates onto the record. I've also created a Slack integration. And in doing that, I've also created a schema that is unique to the Slack. Oh, and it looks like I added that schema to my base bundle. So one thing to be aware of, and this is kind of good, is just kind of keep an eye on the URL so you ensure that those changes get pushed into the right bundle. I think I made that Slack schema in my service management bundle. But I did create a Slack integration that anytime a push notification goes out, I will get a link in my HR Slack channel. But one of the questions is how does someone go through and request this, right? So we have our ITSM request portal and our service catalog. Right now, there's no items in there. So I may want to build out something we call, an offer to be able to request something very simple like an HR task. So I'm going to create a new entry here and call it HR request, call it whatever you want, HR work, HR need. Put that in there, just copy that, maybe add an image in there, make it look good. Is this going to create a request record? Nope, I actually don't want a request record created for this. I want to create my own custom record. So I'm going to add a variable in here. Variable is going to be something real simple. We'll just call this type. I'm going to make it a choice instead of a string, and I'll just put some choices in here. So payroll, W-2, time off, complaint, something like that. Now I have my choices as a very simple variable, and I can build out my fulfillment flow. So this should look very familiar because this is the same workflow tool we've been using everywhere else. I'll drop down into the catalog, say I want to create a piece of work. I don't want a continuous improvement. I want something on the HR table. HR work, there we go. Title, so I can say a new request was made. I'll copy that for now, and I'll say that we have the same output variables if necessary, so I could pick which slot off of the record that I want to output if I want to continue to use this throughout the workflow. And then what I'm going to do is I'll toggle this wait here so I don't have to wait for anything. I'm going to save that. I'm going to go up here, and instead of using this in a script, I'm going to pull in that type value, and I want to use this in template form because I want that to go into my record. So I can do the same thing with the description and the title by inserting this flow variable with the % curly brace in front of it. And now I'm going to pull that out. It looks like I got a period before there. And instead of using that value in a script, I'm going to actually use that value in a text fashion. So now I'll create that record, go there. If I needed to, I could do a run script in here where, maybe I wanted to pull the new records value. I could navigate to that. Instead what I'll do is I'll just navigate to my status page. So we'll just go to a page instead of refresh, and we'll call that page status. And that's our work status page from the end user standpoint. Save that. Head back to our end user portal. Someone goes in the request catalog. I want to, request some time off. I'm going to confirm that. It's going to take me to my confirmation. I hit OK, and then that will then navigate back home. Looks like I might have had I might not have defined that status page, or I may have called it something wrong. But that's basically the end piece there. So, from a custom application, obviously this is not ITSM related, but it is service management, right? This is HR service management, or at least the foundational elements of it. Just to recap again, we've touched on a lot of things. That dynamic data model with the schema tags, creating workflow, whether it was user initiated by a button or data initiated by a trigger, custom notifications using custom templates, and those are all actions. And as well as building out a custom application that can interact with something like the service catalog, which gives you the ability to go through and initiate this request and start this entire process. So looks like we got about 1 minute left. I'm going to check to see if there's any other questions. There's not. If there are any, feel free to type them in the Q&A. Otherwise, I guess we will wrap up. I'll kick it back to John.
Thank you, Donovan. Thank you, Jared. Fine work. I certainly appreciate the effort today. I hope you guys had a good session, learned a few things. Donovan, send me over control, if you will. I've got two more slides I'd like to put up.
Sure thing.
All right. So again, open discussion time. Anything else you've got you want to put in the question bar, please do that, okay? If we don't get to them, I know who the attendees are. I can send you an email back with your answer. As I said at the outset, this has been recorded. We'll get you a link to this session as soon as it's published. Also, the prior session that we had last month that kind of was the forerunner to this on ITSM and MSP, that's also up there on YouTube. I'll send you the link to that as well. If you wish to get a demonstration or dedicated demonstration for your organization, let me know. I'll be happy to do so. Also, if you go to our webpage, you can get a trial instance of your very own that you can play with and see how all these things work, and we're happy to help you as you learn a little bit more about the platform. That's pretty much it for today. We want to get you on your way pretty much on time. So again, on behalf of the entire staff here at Dreamtsoft, we appreciate you coming by to visit with us, and we wish you a pleasant day wherever you happen to be. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.